Bob Baumgart. I sit on the board of directors for the chamber, part of the government affairs committee who puts on these legislative coffees here with our local representatives at the State House. We'd like to thank Senator Schneider for coming today and newly elected Representative Judge. So if we could all give them a little applause, thank you. Perfect. As I said, these are put on by the Government Affairs Committee. The purpose of them is an informational, educational opportunity for us to provide value and interact with our state representatives here, and get a few questions answered in a nice, non-contentious, respectable way. The chamber is an association of businesses and organizations and individuals that we've dedicated promoting growth and prosperity in our local community here in the Waukee area. We can't do that without the businesses and the organizations that participate in our chamber, and one of those is West Bank, and they've made this possible today by sponsoring this event as well. So we'd like to thank them for that. I did see a few dignitaries when I walked in. I think the city administrator, Tim Mormon, I think he's in here. He's over there. Past chair Kevin McCormick for the chamber, and then Melinda Bain, our chamber president, is here as well. So thanks to all of you guys who work for the best interest of our community here. A few quick housekeeping items. Natasha's in the back. She's going to record everything for us today, and then we'll make it available on the chamber's website, so there's no need to get a cramp in your arm with your phone up the entire time or anything. She's here every year for us, and we really appreciate her help. As I said, we at the chamber promote the principles of respect and responsibility and citizenship, and with that, we do have a limited amount of time. We've got roughly an hour. So as I make my way around the room, try to keep everything to a question or maybe a short two-part question, and if we have time to get back to you, we certainly will. We'll try to make our way through everybody. That way everybody has an opportunity to ask anything or comment anything they'd like to say. And then I think with that, we are ready to start. So if I may, I think I will have Senator Schneider maybe give a quick update on the Senate, and then we'll have Representative Judge do an update on the House, and then we'll open up the floor to questions, and I'll make my way around to you guys.
Great. Well, first of all, I want to thank all of you for coming, taking time out of your Saturdays to spend with us and ask us some questions and give us some input of your own on what you'd like to see us do at the Capitol this year. And I also want to welcome Kenan Judge to these as well. After having done these forums with Rob Taylor for the last 6 years, it's a little different doing them with someone new, but Kenan and I think, have gotten things off to a great start in terms of a good working relationship between the two of us. We've already talked about some things that we can work on together to represent our constituents, our mutual constituents at the Capitol, and look forward to working with him for the rest of this session and beyond. This year is also a little different for me because I don't serve on as many committees as I have in the past. In my role now as president of the Senate, I oversee kind of the daily debate within the Senate, and I run the meetings basically. So that takes a lot of time, and it means that I don't have as much time as I've had in the past to devote to committee work. So whereas in the past I've been on 3 or 4 different committees, this year I'm only on appropriations. But that's still a good committee. It's the budget writing committee, and that's the committee that I chaired for the last 2 years, so I've got some familiarity with it. I thought I'd just touch on some topics that we'll all be talking about at the legislature this year, give a brief update of where things stand in the legislative process now, and then talk about a few things that I'm working on too. Workforce is going to be one topic that we'll be addressing. As you all know, we've had a brain drain problem in Iowa for decades, really generations. And right now things are coming to a head because we've got not record low unemployment, but we've got the lowest unemployment rate in the U.S. right now, which is kind of a nice problem to have, but it's still a tough problem because we have a lot of employers who are looking for people to come and work for them. So we'll be talking about things like Future Ready Iowa and other programs we can do to help try and attract people here, help them gain the skills necessary to fit the jobs that are available right now. Children's mental health is also going to be an issue this year. We passed an adult mental health bill last year that passed with unanimous support in both chambers of the legislature, but we haven't really done much with children's mental health right now. One thing the bill that we passed last year required was that a children's mental health task force be assembled and come up with recommendations to the legislature for things for us to do this year. They have met, they have proposed their recommendations. The governor has proposed some of her own in line with what that task force recommended, and we will be taking a look at those during the legislative process as well to figure out what we can do to help address that system. Sports betting is an issue that is getting some attention. Right now, sports betting occurs pretty much in a black market. People make their bets with bookies either here locally or through entities in the Caymans or offshore organizations that they might not be able to get any kind of redress from if they don't collect their money or if something goes bad with their bets. So there are different suggestions for legalizing sports betting in the state. This is made possible by a U.S. Supreme Court ruling last year that legalized sports betting across the U.S. SAVE extension, the local option sales tax for schools runs out in 10 years. This is the penny sales tax. I'm an advocate for extending that SAVE local option sales tax, and that's something that I think we'll see get done this year. I don't know what that will look like yet, but that's something that we're also working on. And right now in the legislative process, we're still in the phase where people are introducing bills. We're having subcommittee meetings in the Senate and in the House on those bills to vet what will actually make its way through the process before the first funnel deadline, which is the end of the first week in March. So from now until then, you'll see a lot of news about bills in subcommittee that are either getting approved or not approved to move on to the full committee. And by the first Friday in March, in order to still be alive, a bill will have had to pass out of committee in either the House or the Senate. So that's the process that has to happen for a bill to stay alive before the end of the first funnel deadline. Some bills that I'll be working on personally, whistleblower law, improvements to our current whistleblower law to help address some of the situations that we've seen occur within the Waukee School District. I'd like to see us be better able to protect teachers or administrators who come forward with legitimate complaints about what they're seeing, about illegal activity they might be seeing or that they think might be happening among some of their peers. Licensing reform is an issue that those of you who've been here before have heard me talk about in the past. This has some real momentum this year, at least with respect to barbers and cosmetology. I think we'll be able to lower the amount of hours necessary for someone to get a license to cut hair, which will be good. Right now we require 2,100 hours, which is more than I think any other state in the U.S. If it's not the most, it's the second highest. Medical cannabis is another issue that I want to address this year. We passed a medical cannabis law a few years ago. We have an Iowa-based company called MedFarm that has made an investment in our state to provide medical cannabis to the people who need it. Right now, they're losing money because our law isn't broad enough to cover the full array of people who could use this product. And we have a THC limit that really is unworkable for them. So I've been working with MedFarm to put some legislation in place that will help us make a more common sense law that will enable them to dispense more medication to people. It'll allow people with more conditions to utilize medical cannabis. So that's just an overview of some of the things that I've got going on. Why don't I end it there? And again, thank you for coming, and turn things over to Representative Judge.
Thank you, Charles. There we go. Thank you, Charles. I also appreciate everybody coming here today and taking their time out of their Saturday to talk with us. And Bob, thank you for the introduction. It's been fascinating for me to be part of the legislature, and I'm honored to be able to do this for you. I can tell you a little bit about what I've been doing in the first weeks. I'm learning a tremendous amount. I'm keeping an open mind with everything I go into, and there's nothing in there that I'm not saying we can or cannot do. So I have a lot of conversations with constituents and really welcome that. We also have I sit on several committees. Committees. I sit on commerce, economic growth, transportation, and the budget subcommittee, health and human services. So I'm learning a lot in every one of those committees, and that's probably where I spend most of my time is when the bills come out, and if I get assigned a bill to be a part of a subcommittee, I'm working hard to understand as much as I can about that bill before we go into the committee. And then if it comes out of subcommittee, any bill that we talk about in committee, I'm really learning the subject matter for that ahead of time, so I don't have to take somebody else's word for what's going on. And so that's been very good for me. It's been a great learning experience. I will say there's a lot of help down there. You find out real quickly that people, it isn't as divided down there as you may think. I mean, there's people at every turn to help you. Charles has been very good to help me if I have a question or reach out and ask what's best for this community. And I think that's the kind of relationship we need out here and we want out here. It's one of the areas that I ran on. I'm going to tell you a few of my passions that the reason I ran, and I think that I'm owning up to those in the work that I do down there. First of all, I talked to a lot of voters last summer, and one of the biggest things that they wanted was civility and compromise. And I'm going in there every day with that on my mind. There's nobody that I don't talk to. There's nobody I won't be friends with. We may have some disagreements on policy, and that's okay. And I was always trained that you can say whatever you want to say. The only thing that matters is tone. And so that's how I'm carrying myself at the Capitol, and will carry myself for you. Education funding is a big one on that for me, and one I ran on. We're going to talk about that in the House tomorrow. We're going to debate that tomorrow afternoon. I think the governor has come out with a 2.3% increase in education. I think the House is coming out tomorrow with a 2.1% in funding. I've co-signed a bill that we're going to discuss tomorrow on a 3% funding for education, public education. And that's one that, and I ran on this, I'll reiterate today, I think school funding is something that should come out first in the budget. And that's our future. It's our future of our kids, especially if Waukee, we're very fortunate, Waukee school systems. But, 3%, we go a long ways here to make sure that we have the budget that we need to have all our programs, all what teachers need. So that debate's going to go on tomorrow, probably go late into the night, and that's part of what we're working on. Healthcare, Charles mentioned it. I think there's a lot of work to do. I'd like to say that, we could spend the rest of the year on it. One of my favorite committees is the Health and Human Services, the Budget Subcommittee, and I'm learning a tremendous amount there. But I will tell you, we have work to do at children's mental health. Charles mentioned we spent a lot of time studying that. The governor is going to appropriate funds. There's a lot to set up. It isn't going to happen overnight, but I'm very proud that we're moving forward on that. So that's been very interesting. I also talked a little bit about listening and being attentive. I'm very proud that a lot of people come down. I talked to a lot of constituents there. I get a lot of emails. I'll make a promise to you that if you're in this district, you're going to get a reply from me, in either written or in the email. So please keep continuing to reach out. That's how we learn. I will tell you that that's one, we've gotten several, those make a difference. As you're an elected official and you get a constituent that tells you something, I mean, it really makes a big difference. So continue to do that. Yeah, I'm very proud. That's how I'll end that. And thanks, Charles, for being so open and welcoming to me down there. I mean, he's a little bit humble in what he does. I mean, he is the president of the Senate, so that's a big deal. And he handles himself with poise. I've watched him and a class, and it's very good to have him down there because I know that if we need something done out here in this district, that I can text him and he will come and we can talk about it. So, and that's a good person to have on our side when issues come up. So there will be things that we disagree on, but we'll do it in a way that that'll show the respect we need here. So thank you, Bob, and appreciate the time.
All right. And, with that, I did forget somebody who is important, and his organization is important. The Waukee Police Department and Sergeant Getson is here today. Thank you guys for helping us out with these events and everything you do. All right. And with that, I think we'll open it up. I'll try to bring the microphone to you guys to make this easy, and then if anybody wants to ask something, just raise your hand.
Representative Judge, I have no problem with more funding for the schools if we also make sure that money is not wasted. As a classic example was right here in Waukee, another example was in Marshalltown. How are you going to make sure that the money winds up benefiting the students directly?
That's a good point. I think with first of all, I can never say there's never going to be a district or something that there's not going to be a problem with. But I know with the way the SSA, the budget process works, that money does go to the students and teachers. And if we set up, get the funding they need and go directly to the funding the students need in the SSA, then it is going to get to them.
What is the SSA?
It is per student, how much per student gets for the schools, yes. And if we fund it that way, first of all, I can't promise you there's never going to be any corruption. But I can tell you that by and large there isn't. And that we have to trust that system to work. And it really affects some smaller school districts as well, and school districts that maybe don't have the same, not growing like we are. This money and class sizes, the way we handle students that in the arts, the way we handle or have money for the arts, the way we have money for counselors in the schools. We've been underfunding schools for 10 years, in my opinion, and we need to get back on top. And I look at it at a different perspective. I came from a poor zip code, and public education was what got me my start in life, and what gave me the chance to be and it'll tie back into jobs. We start talking about jobs later. So rate of inflation, we're not funding it to the rate of inflation. So I can't sit here and promise you that there'll be no bad actors out there. But by and large, every school is going to do the right thing, in my opinion.
Okay, next question.
As an accountant, I'm very concerned about the issue
Stand
that-
and say your name and
Oh.
the town you're from.
Thank you. I'm Catherine Wells. I'm from Waukee. My work history has been an accountant. I'm a retired CPA, so I have great concern about oversight of the funds that are appropriated, such as the schools. I want our students to have advantage, but I don't want what just happened with the funding that was wasted. So my concern is what oversight do you propose, or what's in place to prevent that from happening?
Well, I believe we have the proper oversight in place in the state. I mean, it boils down to, we have a school board. We have to trust them to do their work. We have administrators, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend to know everything in the background of what happened in Waukee. And I've not studied it that well. I've not taken a look at to see, hey, this is what the school board did, this is what the school board didn't. But we have the oversight in place, and I think there's a lot of people that have their heart in the right place that aren't going to waste money. I mean, I think the school board's done a great job cleaning up the efforts of what's happened, and there's some people that are not in place today. And I believe we have the proper oversight already, in my opinion, if the school boards and administration do their jobs. And yes.
If I could just add on to that too, I think the whistleblower law that I'm working on right now will help with that, because it will give people who might not currently feel like they can safely report something they're seeing, it'll give them more comfort that now they can. So that's one of the goals of this whistleblower law, and I know Kenan is interested in helping me with that too once we get it over to the House. So that's one thing we can do. And another thing we can do in our roles as legislators is like what Representative Taylor and I did when we first saw the news reports of the Waukee misspending and Eric Rose's malfeasance last year, which is request the state auditor to come in and do a more thorough review of the finances and the financial situation of what's going on in the district. Now, that being said, maybe this is something you can answer, and if we can't talk about it now, maybe after the forum's over here. But one of the things that Auditor Mosman mentioned in her report was that the outside audit that the school board conducted was, I can't remember how many hours they put into it, but it was fewer hours spent on that audit than what is generally done for a normal school district or public entity of that size. So I've been trying to get a better understanding myself of what the independent auditing requirements are for school districts and local governments like the Waukee School District to make sure that they're getting proper audits in the first place. Because we need to have confidence that whatever independent audit is being done is a credible one. Otherwise, we'd have to have the state auditor come in and audit every single school district, which I think would be probably unworkable. So if you have any input on that, I'd certainly be open to it.
I'd be glad to talk to you about it, but I'm sure other people have other issues that I do want to talk to you about.
Okay, thanks, Catherine.
And I'll make one other comment on school funding is, everybody thinks Waukee has all the money they need, but we're growing so fast and that our school funding is in the rear, so we don't have the money. Our budget is tight right now, and that's why you're going to see school classes, their size move up. And so that's why that I think that 3% is so important.
Good morning, Senator Schneider and Representative Judge. I'm Flora Schmidt. I'm in West Des Moines, Iowa, and I'm the Executive Director for the Iowa Behavioral Health Association. We represent mental health centers as well as substance use disorder agencies and gambling addiction across the state of Iowa. We are represented in all 99 counties. Last year, you passed House File 2456, Mental Health and the Complex Needs, which is a wonderful first start. But for the complex needs to work, it is both mental health as well as substance use disorder for the entire behavioral health system. Substance use disorder agencies across the state are in crisis right now. They have seen their rates not increase for 10 to 20 years. We are having agencies that are closing their satellite locations in the rural areas. This needs to be addressed, and one of the key areas we're struggling with right now is on the medication of treatment, assistive treatment for our use disorders, and essentially that's being able to provide them buprenorphine and other drugs in order to, to address their opioid addictions. And what we're finding is that with the Medicaid program, there's a prior authorization required. And yes, the MCOs are meeting it within the federal dictation of 24 hours, but when somebody walks into a clinic and needs help now, 24 hours is too long. They go home and they reshoot up, they readdress their drugs of addiction. We're working with Medicaid, we're working with the Drug Utilization Review Committee, but their answers right now are to amend the form that we have to send in. That is not going to make response times any quicker. Their other response is, instead of having it covered under a pharmacy benefit, they want it covered under a medical benefit, which means these small agencies are supposed to be stocking these drugs so they have them on hand to provide them at any hour of the day. Well, to stock drugs in a lot of these agencies is not really the best method, and they're already struggling with rates that they're not being paid what it costs to provide the services, and now they're supposed to start to become a pharmacy beside. We need your help to get Medicaid and the Drug Utilization Review Committee to rescind these prior auths for medication-assisted treatment. States across the country are already doing this, and if we don't, we're going to lose a lot of our substance use providers across the state, and so we're asking for your help.
Yeah, thanks, Flora. That's an issue I've heard from not only your organization, but others like the Iowa Medical Society about too. Yeah, you've got a lot of allies on that issue. That's one that I'm supportive of. And just for further clarification for people who might not be familiar with it, I think what you're talking about is a situation where someone will come into one of these clinics, they've got an addiction, and they want to take, there's a drug you can take to help wean yourself off of that addiction because of the way it chemically bonds with cells in the body or brain receptors. And right now, the way things are working is someone has to get a pre-authorization for this. Well, that takes time. And if these centers can't dispense that medication right away, then you may have lost an opportunity to save someone from addiction or to even save their life. So we're working to find a way to just say, look, if someone comes in, they want this drug, give it to them. Save a life. Give someone an opportunity to get rid of an addiction and improve themselves. So I'll continue to work with you guys on that. There's a lot of momentum for it, and I think we'll be able to get something done on it.
And I will also support that. I think that's one of the reasons I asked to be on to Health and Human Services, the Budget Subcommittee. I'll have a process to learn. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say I know everything about it, but in the end of this 2-year term, I'm going to know a lot more. But I can tell you one of my passions are people that do have addictive behavior and are on alcohol and drugs, that we have to have more resources. And you'll have an ally in that, I'll promise you that.
Next question.
My name's Dustin Rush. I live in West Des Moines, but this is universal to just about everyone. I just wanted to thank legislation for the historic tax reform that put more money in hardworking Iowans' pockets. My question is about property tax reform. Are we looking to cap the growth of property taxes, or are we looking to reduce the burden?
That's an issue that we've got a lot of discussion on right now, Dustin. The hard part about property taxes is it's complicated because it involves how properties are assessed. It involves levies from multiple different local governments, county, city, school board, hospital, mental health levy. So there are a lot of moving parts to it. So no one has like a silver bullet solution at this point in time. But what I do know from knocking on doors, and I'm sure Kenan probably heard this from people too, is that this is a real, growing property taxes are a real burden, especially for people who are on fixed incomes, a lot of seniors whose property tax burdens are outpacing the cost of inflation. Property taxes are always due. They always seem to go up. They don't go down if your income goes down or if your income stays flat. So I'd like to find a way that we can provide more predictability and stability to property tax rates so that we're not taxing seniors out of their homes. And so that prices or the property tax burden doesn't outpace the cost of inflation and income growth. So it's an issue we're studying, but there's no silver bullet answer to it that I can give you right now.
And here's my viewpoint on that is what we have to work on, and Senator Schneider's talked about it. I think we have until we get a good jobs program and work on growing this state, the economy of this state, yeah, we have low unemployment, but we need to start working on good paying jobs that we grow this economy by 3 and 4% in order to have the resources we need to fund our programs. Right now, I mean, we have the budget, but there's no excess, and we're talking about 2.1% in funding to education to 3. I mean, that money, it just isn't there. So until we really see this state growing, we're going to have to engage rural Iowa and make sure that we have a plan to get rural Iowa back into being more productive in these smaller towns. Until we engage rural Iowa and make sure we're getting good jobs, and we're not going to be able to afford to do much else. And that would be my viewpoint. I'll just go back to in business. You know, if we didn't grow our sales, you can't grow. And I think it's one of the biggest things we need to work on. And not just low unemployment. I appreciate that. I think low unemployment's great, but we have to get better paying jobs in this state.
I'm Veronica Lack. I'm one of the Soil and Water Conservation Commissioners for Dallas County. I got elected with a lot of support because our water here is testing so high in the nitrogen fertilizers that our waterworks can't safely treat our water. When the bacteria levels go up, especially the cyanobacteria from the blue-green algae on the Raccoon River where our source water comes from, the waterworks department has to chlorinate. When they chlorinate cyanobacteria, they release the very carcinogenic cyanotoxins that cause so many high animal loss numbers on my farm's well. And I was never told to test for cyanobacteria or the high anhydrous ammonia levels in our water. When you chlorinate high anhydrous ammonia water, you create trihalomethanes, the decontaminant that causes the neurological effects that affect many Iowans. It also draws arsenic and high lead levels, just like in Flint, Michigan. Our water was testing in the Cedar Valley River Group aquifers, where my farm is still in, real high in high cadmium lead. Now, the DNR hides those well tests from us yet to this day because in my suit against the state of Iowa and the Iowa DNR for not altering their chlorination protocol, not notifying Iowans that they're drinking higher and higher levels of anhydrous ammonia, the Attorney General's Attorney David Stewart claimed we can't tell Iowans that they're drinking ever-increasing levels of that nitrogen fertilizer because it's produced by the Koch brothers and the Arab Orascom companies that give so much support to our Congress and representatives. Now, how are we going to even get our funding for our schools when we don't even give the high school principals and the administration their actual grant amounts or their funding? They're supposed to have it at least a year before the start of the school system, and they don't get it. They can't even figure out how much they're going to have to hire a teacher or plan a program. We have to start realizing our system. We need in schools those STEAM systems. We need coding taught, started in kindergarten. Our jobs and our future in this nation depend on our education, and because we aren't even getting the funding to our schools soon enough for them administrations to do the planning, we are setting our kids behind. We are setting this nation behind because we do not do this funding. We are collecting data like in the water systems across this country. We collect the well test data,
And then Pruitt at the EPA redacted all of the well test data for anhydrous ammonia right after Trump was sworn in. Now we have a nation that is subjected to ever-increasing levels of the nitrogen fertilizers that because of Trump's decision to redact my son's Russell III equation. That issue is carried on in causing problems more than we can deal with. But as on the Soil and Water Conservation Commission right now in Dallas County, I'm trying to find funding for water tests of the nitrogen fertilizers before we do an expensive conservation project. I just voted on a $10,000 towards GRS, which a great restoration structure can cost up to $60,000 to $80,000. If we do water testing before the project and then after, we might see how much effectiveness we are gaining from spending all that money. All this planning in schools, also we need to have the research to take advantage of the most effective plans in our education. I have a teaching and a math degree from UNI. Unfortunately, we are hiring, I feel.
Is there a specific question? I don't want to cut you off, but I also want to be respectful to everybody else's time. Is there a specific question you had for the senator and the representative, please?
Mainly, we need to get back to justifying and using our money effectively. What was the word you used, Senator Schneider?
Oversight, maybe?
Yes, but also
Accountability?
yes. We need to, because our funds are not limited. I have a farm, my property taxes keep going up, and now the property value is actually decreasing on that farm. But at the same time,
Thank you, Veronica.
You know, I can maybe answer. First of all, Veronica, I'm glad you're on the Soil and Water Commissioner because you'll be the type of person that at least bring the conversation up. And my advice to you and everybody I talk to is we got to work together. We can no longer throw stones at agriculture. We have to make sure we work with them together. They are our partners. We're blessed to live in Iowa. The reason this country we spend 10% of our money on food is because we have the best agriculture in the world. And I think we have to continue to make sure that we work with agriculture to clean up water. I can tell you that I have never met a farmer. I come from a farm background that wants bad water. So I think as long as we take that look at it, make sure we're bringing agriculture to the table when we're talking about it, we're going to be much better off. And as far as your question on funding schools 1 year ahead, I couldn't agree more. I think we have to. Well, I think I think school funding should be the first bite out of every budget. And that's how we grow. That's how this state will grow the economy in 20 years. So I agree with you on that.
Good morning, Representative Judge. Congratulations on your election. And I don't remember when you were elected recently, Senator, but congratulations on your promotion to Senate President. I'm Matthew Pierce. I actually live over in Urbandale in Bradzon and John Forbes District. So I'd come here with a little bit different idea of what I was going to say, but I had wanted to. Senator Schneider specifically about. I don't know how this works. So my brother lives in Colorado, and they've had recreational cannabis for a long time now, medical marijuana for longer. I don't want to smoke marijuana. I never have. I'm highly allergic. But this last summer, I developed Crohn's disease. And if anybody knows what that is, I've lost 25% of my body weight. And I am literally like skin and bones. Like none of my clothes fit anymore. And part of that, I had done some research online that there was some kids in Colorado who have taken cannabinol oil or something, and that had helped them. Right now, I just got on a drug called Humira. It is $5,000 for a month's supply. That's $60,000 a year. I don't pay obviously that entire cost. I pay, I guess, my premiums, and then I pay a little bit extra. But I think that I would prefer to have a more natural solution rather than a synthetic pharmaceutical thing that tells me in its brochure you can get all sorts of cancers and you can get like shortened life expectancy from this drug that's supposed to be helping you, rather than a natural solution that has been around. It's in nature. Like, man didn't make it, God made it. So I think that's pretty important. So yeah, I never thought I'd have to advocate for this stuff. But after I've lost so much weight, yeah, I'm like, it's disturbing. So that was that. So that's good. So yeah, I commend you for that, and I hope Representative will have your support for expanded cannabinol or medical marijuana or whatever. So that's important to me. It wasn't a year ago. The other thing is the workforce, very quickly. I would echo Representative Judge. I think, yeah, 2.4% unemployment is pretty amazing. I wonder, I work 2 jobs. So I work 7 days a week, and I've worked 7 days a week for about 6 months. I haven't been to bed. I worked overnight at the airport last night, and then I worked my 8 to 5 job, and then I went to bed, and then I got up, and then I worked, and now I'm here. And so I have to do that in order to pay for my health insurance premiums from my first job, because they don't actually pay me enough so I can pay the co-pays and the deductibles that this insurance provides me. So I had to get another job so I could afford the insurance that I got from the first job. So that's, again, and now I really need this insurance because this Humira is $5,000 a month. So I would strongly encourage you guys to look at increasing our minimum wage. I make $15 an hour, and it is very hard for me to, I couldn't make ends meet. I had to get another job. And my employer simply will not give me a raise. And I've been looking for other work, and it's just not happened yet. But, you know, we've had $7.25 an hour for 12 years. And 12 years ago, I was 24, 12 years ago. And so, you know, I think I'm worth more than $15 an hour, but if my company is not forced to give me any more, they won't, because they don't want to. So anyway, those are kind of related. Sorry I took so long, but thank you for your time, and thank you for being here.
Thanks, Matthew. And I just want to say you're not alone in thinking you never have to advocate or want to advocate for medical cannabis before. Right. The reason I got involved in this is because of other people who never thought that they would advocate for it either. But what people are seeing across the country is that it can help them in certain situations. The first family that talked to me about it has a child with severe, I can't remember the name of the condition, but she has seizures, and this has helped people similar to her all across the country. And it's frustrating that the federal government hasn't rescheduled marijuana as a Class 2 drug, which would enable more scientific and medical research on this and hopefully put it into the mainstream of medicine more quickly than what we're seeing right now. But in the meantime, I'm committed to doing what we can at the state level to help make this option available for people who could benefit from it.
Well, first of all, I'll commend you for your work ethic and working as hard as you are. You have a great attitude from what you're going through, and we'll help you. I did tour the Kenan Industries, their facility, and I've talked to several doctors about medical cannabis, and we need to, in my opinion, we need to look at increasing the rate, but control it by how much you can buy at one time. And there's going to be good work going on this year on that. I'm hopeful. And with your question on the wages, there's a lot of people in this state that are doing exactly what you're doing. They're working 2 jobs, they're not getting by. So we have to, and this can't happen overnight, but we have to look at how we can bring better jobs in here that pay. And especially we have to look at rural Iowa. And then we need to look at, and it's a fine balance in minimum wage. I mean, if you look at raising minimum wage in a small town in southern Iowa versus Des Moines, I mean, $15 an hour in Des Moines, you can't make it. But you can, but if you lived in a real small rural area, it might be better. So we have to balance the growing the economy by everything we do and touch. So know you have an advocate in me for people that are out there working 2 jobs that are not making it. I'm thinking about it every day. And I wish I could wave a magic wand, but I can't. But you have an advocate there. So thank you.
I'll keep doing it.
Yep, keep doing it. You've got a good attitude.
Next question.
Good morning, gentlemen. I'm Steve Herwig. I live on the Dallas County side of West Des Moines. What I'd like you to address in a moment is the process to propose a reformation of the Judicial Nominating Committee. This is a process that dates from the days of Governor Robert D. Ray and has served as a model for a nominating commission for judges to our highest courts in the state. Currently, the governor nominates 8 members of the commission, and the Iowa Bar Association nominates 8 members to the commission. It's presided by the senior judge, who's not the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. There's a proposal to change this so that the legislature would be in charge of nominating the lawyers appointed to the panel. I think that injects partisanship to something that's been nonpartisan. I think some of the statements about, quote, judicial activism, end quote, have been demeaning to our judicial system. And I think that injecting partisanship is going to affect the independence of our judiciary, which I would prefer. But I'd like you to address why this change seems to be necessary now for something that's worked for more than half a century. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. I'll give you my perspective on it, and it's not necessarily going to be the perspective you hear from other people in my party. I do not agree with the legislative appointments process that's spelled out in the bills that have been introduced. The major issue I see in the current process is the potential conflict of interest that exists in having a judge serve on a commission with 8 bar member lawyers. The potential for the conflict arises when a judge might express his or her opinion on the voting method that should be used for sending forth nominations to the governor, or expressing his or her opinion about which candidate is one who should be passed along to the governor for consideration. I've heard from lawyer members of the commission in both parties who see that as a potential conflict of interest and believe that ought to go away. That does not require a lot of change. All it would require is putting someone else on the commission other than the most senior judge on either the Supreme Court, who's not the chief justice, or the Court of Appeals. And then once that person is removed, I guess you got to figure out, in my opinion, you'd want an odd number of people serving on the commission so that you don't have ties. But that doesn't require a lot of change. We still would have a merit-based system that way. We would eliminate a potential conflict of interest, and that I think would be a better and more fair process. So that's what I would like to see.
In my opinion, I think that if we go to that system that you talked about, we do put partisanship in politics into the nominating system. And this isn't, in my opinion, a Republican Democrat, because if we get a Democratic governor, which we will someday, it's going to go the other way, and we're going to see these big, massive swings from one way or to the other. So I think the system that we have is where we should be at. I'm willing to work with Senator Schneider if he sees something that we need to tweak in it, because he does have good, he's a lawyer, he could help. But to me, introducing this current system is not the right way to go.
Hello, my name is Greg Malone. I'm from the southeast side here in Des Moines. My question today has to do with the cost-cutting side of our financial liabilities in our state. Something that's been worked for thousands and thousands of years here on the earth is, if a man will not work, neither let him eat. And that's even quoted in the Bible. Are we addressing workfare here in Iowa? Is that something that's on the horizon, or something that we could require to help to reduce some of the costs that we are bearing due to our taxes?
Are you, just for clarification, Greg, are you talking about like work requirements for people who are getting federal assistance?
Yeah, any type of assistance, state and or federal assistance, that's correct.
There's some talk of that. I don't know that any bill has been introduced in the Senate yet. There is some talk of that, of having some kind of work requirements in place for able-bodied people who can go out and work. I'll keep an open mind on that. I do think we need a safety net for people who legitimately, for one reason or another, can't work because of a physical or mental condition or something like that. But we do have workforce needs, and I'm of the opinion that if someone is able-bodied and of sound mind, they ought to work if they can. But again, I know there's discussion about it, but I don't know that there's any particular bill. So we'll see what happens with that during the legislative process.
And I'll speak a little bit to that. I do believe we need a safety net, and we have one. I think it's very, very important. I believe that there's dignity in work, so we have to help people to, if you're less fortunate, that we have to help you get a job. That may be helping you with daycare. That may be helping you with mental health. It may be helping you in other ways, but I think it should be a trampoline. Any help we give should be a trampoline to get you back into workforce, to help you. And there's a lot of people that have a lot of different needs that deserve and need help, and we have to have their backs. Sometimes it's no fault of their own. So we have to set policies in place. Sometimes it's education. We may have to help them, train them for a job. Sometimes it's giving them the courage to go out and look for one through training. And so I hear what you're saying, and I don't know of any bill that I have seen in the House, but I know that that's one thing that's what I believe in the system.
Okay, next question. I know you've had your hand up for a minute. We have some others too, but I'll let you go quick, if it's quick.
A lot of these programs, like Medicaid, Medicare, are not, we voted for them. We paid into them through our tax dollars, withholding from our wages. That is for all of those people, even the children. Isn't 60% about the ratio of the kids that are on Medicaid? That funding, we paid into to have that, because kids are being affected by all the contaminants in our water, and you don't realize how all these programs help the damaged people and children from way on up. I'm a teacher. When we see these kids that come in with learning disabilities that are similar to mine, I graduated with honors from UNI, but I had the effects of drinking high levels of atrazine that causes, it crosses the brain barrier. It causes learning disabilities. We have to deal with them in our school systems. We need that funding for those special ed programs, for all the different training that we then can get these. Yeah, but
We don't want to
Medicare-
create a debate. What we'd like to do is direct questions to
We
our
should not-
state representative. So if you have a question, please ask them a
Please.
question.
Please don't think of those programs needing work requirements. The whole goal of our system is to take care and bring people up to the level of their best abilities. For education, for the future jobs that require coding in kindergarten, all the skills that we are going to require in this new computer age. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Do you have a question?
No.
Yeah, maybe, there are a couple other people who had their hands up. Melinda, maybe we should get to them.
Okay, so next. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Karen Herwig, and I'm from West Des Moines in your district, and I'm following up on the judicial issue. I am concerned that the reason this is arising is because of the activity of the conservative, anti-choice constituency that has now been very disturbed by what they call judicial activism. And I think judicial activism is any ruling you don't agree with. Right. And so I would like to get the legislature out of the business of interfering with individual decisions that families make, men and women make, in consultation with their physicians, and get the legislature out of the act of enforcing heartbeat bills and so on and so forth that are not in consort with the Supreme Court of the United States at this point. And that's my stance on that. Thank you.
Okay, next question.
My name is Kevin Paul. I live in Clive. I'm actually in Senator Schneider's district, not in yours, Representative Judge. Unfortunately, Representative Converse is having a coffee or whatever at this exact time. My wife is there. The one thing I would like to address, SGR 1, which deals with local control of schools, and nothing wrong, have no opposition to local control on schools. That is something that's important. One of the things we want to be sure is not affected or is not taken out of the state mandates are the programs that currently fall under the jurisdiction of the Department of Education, things like gifted education in particular, where those are things that have been required. There is a state mandate for those programs, has been. There is state money that goes. The local districts do some matching. It would be inappropriate. It would just be wrong for that segment of the student population not to be served, so that just as special needs students are able to and are required to receive adequate training, information, schooling to maximize their needs, gifted children should be the same.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm not familiar with that bill. Can you tell me what it does?
It deals with. Sorry. I'm not as up to it as my wife is. She is an educator. I'm a retired state employee and a bus driver. And, but it deals with local control, going back to local school districts. As I said, nothing wrong with that prospect, but there are certain things in that currently the Department of Education has some jurisdiction over. As I said, gifted education is the one that I'm certain and aware of. If you're interested, I'm sure my wife would be more than happy to get additional information to you.
Thank you.
Next question. You say your name and stand and the town you're from, and then we'd like to keep it more to questions directly to the legislators, if you can.
I'm David Leonard. I'm from Waukee. Charles, I've encouraged you year after year to do something about puppy mills. Year after year, little if anything is done. We still have torturous puppy mills. The legislature is firmly in the hands of Republicans. So my question to you, Charles, is why don't Republicans like puppies?
I've missed you, Dave. As you may know, we have a pet Bichon, who I adore and love. He's a part of the family. And I think this is really more of a rural-urban issue than it is a Republican-Democrat issue. There's more momentum this year than there has been in the past to increase penalties for animal abuse and neglect. And that's partly because of a lot of recent events that we've all read about and seen in the news. And there's also a lot more momentum this year to do something on puppy mills. And that's in part because of one really egregious instance, and there are several, but there's one in particular in southwest Iowa where someone claimed to have been training puppies for breeders, and several of them were found dead at this person's puppy mill. So there's some actual momentum to get something done. I would like to go a little bit further than what some people would. The Animal Rescue League has introduced a bill in the past that would not only increase penalties for animal abuse and neglect, but also clarify what constitutes animal abuse and neglect. Our criminal statute right now is very vague and ambiguous. It requires that someone have, I think it's sadistic intent, or it's something in sadistic, but it's a phrase that has no real legal definition. And its interpretation it's interpreted differently by different courts in the state. So some people will get convicted for animal abuse and neglect, and some people won't, even though the cases are very similar. So I think we need to not only enhance penalties, but also clarify definitions so that we've got a more workable definition.
Dave, thank you. That's a great question, and one that we're working on in the House. I read a bill that Representative Holt from Denison put out yesterday, and I've been getting a lot of questions about this from constituents, a lot of emails. And as I knocked doors last summer, it's a big concern that we rank towards the bottom in the country in animal abuse and puppy mills. So hopefully we'll see something this year on that, but I do agree with Senator Schneider that it is an rural-urban divide. And our agriculture farmers, you know, they're very cautious about any bills regulating animals because they've had so many people come in. I can speak to this being in the meat business all my life. There's a lot of groups that come in and try to pin them in a corner about how they treat animals. And we have to get beyond that, and that's why I'm glad to see that bill out there. I haven't studied it. I read it yesterday, but I haven't studied it in length. And it's one thing I've learned, that you can read a bill, but then you have to really talk to people about it because there's sometimes unintended consequences. But I did read it yesterday, and I'm hoping that we can get something done on it as well. And I got a large part of constituents emailing me. I don't know if you've seen anything, Charles, on that, or...
Yeah, oh yes,
yeah.
I have.
Good morning, Senator Schneider, and again...
Hi, Tom.
My name is Thomas Rothwell. I'm from West Des Moines, and I'm in Senator Schneider's district. Congratulations on your election, Representative Judge.
Thank you.
On the whistleblower thing, Charles, I wanted to ask you, is there going to be language in there that's going to hold offenders personally accountable for damages that are awarded? I think specifically in terms of some of the elected representatives that we had that caused some great embarrassment as well as significant awards. I'd like to see these people being held accountable personally for those awards as opposed to it being passed on to the state. Can you comment on that first?
Yeah, we are looking at the damages provision right now to see what to put in there. The goal, of course, would be that someone is able to report something up the chain or to a third party without being damaged themselves, without feeling the need to be fired or having been discharged before they bring some kind of legal claim. But yeah, we are looking at the damages section.
Okay. That's real important. That's for personal responsibility and also being held accountable to the people that elected them.
Mm-hmm.
And my second question was on the cannabis issue again. And I wanted to know what your intentions are with the legislation going forward to reconcile the gap between the federal scheduling issue and Iowa's now embracing medical cannabis. There's a disconnect there, and my personal opinion is that we need to resolve it on this side and hold the federal government accountable for getting out of our business, which is providing medical supervision and oversight to the people of Iowa without unnecessary interference to the federal government. So that's the question. What are you going to do as a Senate leader to help us resolve the disconnect with the Schedule I federal classification of cannabis?
Yeah, I really don't know what all we can do to resolve that split. I mean, at some point, Congress has to take some action on this and reschedule cannabis from Schedule I to Schedule II, or marijuana from Schedule I to Schedule II, so people can do research on it. I can use the bully pulpit to the best of my ability to try and encourage our local representatives to do that, and senators, and I have done that and will continue to do so. But in the meantime, I think we just need to continue to push the limit to the extent that we can on what we can make available to Iowans who are in need of this medication, for whom it would provide some kind of useful benefit. So I'll continue to try and do that as well. In the bill I'm working on now, I would increase the number of conditions for which someone could use medical cannabis. We'd move from a percentage of THC to a milligram, which would help better for dosing for patients and would be better for companies like MedFarm, Iowa companies that are making an investment in this to make it available to people.
Next question.
Hi, I'm Nancy Augustine from Johnston, and to ask another clarification on your whistleblower bill that do you already have that bill assigned with a number?
No, I don't. It's still in drafting. I'm getting feedback on it from I've been talking to Terry Welker, is one of the people I've been working with to get some input on what he thinks we ought to include in it.
Okay, I would like to suggest that this also include protection for the public. And the reason I say this, in 2012, my son was involved in a DHS China case, and I had never knew anything about this system, how it worked, but as we were going through the process, it didn't feel right, and I started doing a lot of research. So for the past, since 2012, I've become a family advocate and reached out to many other families that have been involved in this process. And as y'all know, there were some tragic deaths back in 2017, the starvation death of Sabrina Ray and Natalie Finn, just to name a few of the tragedies that happened and made the newspaper. Well, those of us that are involved in these systems, we know how they work. We tried to reach out to you legislators. I personally have been to Washington, D.C. We held a legislative breakfast in 2015 to educate you legislators on what was happening with the Department of Human Services and how they were treating the people. In 2016, we spoke in front of the House Oversight Committee requesting an investigation and an audit into DHS. In 2017, then the deaths occurred. We knew that there were a lot of things going on in that department that was not right. They were not doing their job. So the point that I'm getting to is I have been retaliated by everyone in the Department of Human Services, from the former director on down to the smallest employee. I was denied being able to adopt my grandkids for that reason. And there are many other people that have also been treated unfairly by the Department of Human Services, basically retaliation for speaking out, for reporting when we see things wrong. And so what I'm asking, would you consider adding in public protection when we try to reach out to the sources that we should, like the Ombudsman Office, the legislatures, the county attorneys, the police department? We're getting turned away. So is there some provision that you could add protection for the public?
Yeah, that's something I'm looking at too. And if you'd like to see a draft of it, I'd be happy to send you the draft I'm working on, Nancy, and you could let me know if you think that would be effective or if you think we ought to add something else to it.
Thank you.
We have just under 10 minutes left, just to point that out to everybody. So if you do have a question, try to keep them pretty concise so that everybody gets a chance. Is there a next question?
I didn't introduce myself before. Bryant Wells. I live here in Waukee. I'm in both of your districts. Different situation. I'm concerned about property taxes, so we kind of covered it as in the education thing. But they just keep on going up. It's just insane for people who are retired, like my wife and myself. When we moved here 11 years ago, we bought a house for about the same as we sold it. Sold our house in Minnesota, but our property taxes were double. Now they've just about doubled again. And it's really difficult. What do you guys want to do to try and retain retirees? We're seriously thinking about moving.
And that's one of the issues that we're trying to address with this. Different ideas have been suggested for retirees, like exempting the first $150,000 of assessed valuation from property tax altogether. So that's one thing that people have floated out there. And some people have suggested in the past holding people's property tax payment flat once they do retire. Now, how you do that becomes complicated. How do you keep track of when a person retires? How do you know if they're not drawing income from some other source, if they're not working part-time or something like that? So some of the suggestions are more workable than others. I'm open to other ideas, and I know other legislators are open to other ideas too.
One thing that would be helpful would be to not tax pensions.
That's something we would like to do too. Well, on the Republican side anyway.
Social Security a few years ago. Which
Right. Yeah, we
Questions
phased
have to
those
go
out.
on the mic to be on the recording.
You did help with Social Security a few years ago, and that really helps. But removing the state income tax on pensions would help a great deal.
Yeah.
At least, but either one, property tax or income tax or both, would really help keep retirees from moving to Texas or Florida.
Yeah, I agree completely. Some even moved to Nebraska. Can you believe that? Oh, that's true. Kenan can probably tell you that, and that has to do with capital gains on what kind of plan do you guys have?
With Hy-Vee stock, yeah.
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 I mean, you could probably
yeah,
speak to that, because
yeah.
you do see some people move
Oh, for
even.
sure,
I mean,
yeah.
for someone to have to move to Nebraska after they retire, that is sad.
Well, I would agree with you, first of all, on helping seniors protect and keep them here, because I do think it's a real problem. I've seen several people, even in our neighborhood that I live at in Waukee, that have moved, and it's because their property taxes went up so high. So we have, and there's only one way, in my opinion, other than the laws that Charles and you were talking about, we have to do a better job, and this is going to take time. We have to do a better job of growing this economy. Because as we sit right now, there's not the money in the budget that we can just wave a magic wand and lower all kinds of taxes. We have to be committed to this and make sure that we do this in order to. We can put some laws in to help seniors, and I would support and listen to them, because I don't want to lose our bright and talented people in this area, and I hate to see somebody that's worked their whole life and they can't afford to stay in their home, and it's a real problem. So I'm all open ears on it.
With property taxes specifically, it's the tricky part is the impact on local governments that we need to think about, because property tax revenue doesn't go to the state general fund, it goes to local governments. So, you know, you've got growing communities like Waukee and West Des Moines that do need revenue to provide services for growing businesses and accommodating more people, providing public safety. We've got schools that need resources to educate kids. We've got the Dallas County Hospital that needs resources for a growing county population. So there are a lot of different things that we have to think about, and that's what makes it more complicated. So it's a part of a continuing conversation, and I appreciate your input on this and encourage you to continue to speak out about those issues. Thank you.
I think we have time for maybe one more here, depending on how long it is.
Angela Clauser from West Des Moines. Managed care, still not working, especially for long-term services. Last year, Senator, we had many emails. You agreed via email to the carve-out. There were multiple bills. You voted against it. I understand there is a House file and Senate file this year for carving out long-term. What are your thoughts for this year?
I don't remember a bill being brought up for a vote on the floor, but I know that I've said in the past that if Jerry Foxhoven recommended carving out LTSS, the LTSS population from Medicaid, that I would support that. He's not recommended that. We still do have issues with managed care. This has been frustrating for everybody. And I think that we've seen some positive steps take place so far. We do have a new DHS director in Jerry Foxhoven. We have a new actuary. We have a new Medicaid director. And the state also is negotiating new contracts with the MCOs. I'm told those contracts include more teeth as to timeliness of payment to providers. And I'm going to be looking for that once those contracts are signed. If that language is not in those contracts, then I would support putting that in legislation. We're looking at a bill that would unify the process for providing pre-auths to the MCOs, as a couple of other states have done. Right now we've got 2 MCO providers. Each of them requires a different pre-authorization form before they'll agree to reimburse services or provide services. As a part of the bill that Flora Schmidt talked about earlier, we're looking at combining all those into one pre-auth that would make it much more easy, not only for the providers, but for the MCOs to submit claims and to pay claims. So things are getting better. They're not perfect yet. And to the extent something isn't in these contracts that would help and that we're not already suggesting in legislation, then I think we ought to legislate those provisions this year as well, including timeliness of claims and the unification of the pre-auths.
I'll make a comment on that too. I think we have a lot of work to do. If you have a bill and somebody sends you a bill for work that you've done to an MCO, it ought to be paid. And it's plain and simple. We have in the managed care, in the Angela, in somebody that's in a nursing home or somebody that's quadriplegic, I don't know that we need to have them in the managed health care system. But more importantly, these health care, the home providers, they have to be paid. I mean, I met with companies that are borrowing money a year ago just to make wages in their organizations. So I will not be afraid to stand up to these MCOs and make sure people are getting paid for their services. I will support legislation that does that and work with Senator Schneider to develop something that we get through this. It's a problem, and it needs to be solved. And I'm willing to work hard on it. I appreciate your question.
I think we'll wrap it up there. I think we should all thank Senator Schneider and Representative Judge for coming out and spending their Saturday morning with us. Thank you very much. The Waukee Chamber of Commerce would also like to thank all of you guys for coming out and participating in these events. We like to see the turnout. We like to see the questions. We know we're bringing value to all of you in our community when we do these things. So thank you for everybody. This is the first event of the year. We have a few more scheduled. Pay attention to the Waukee Chamber's emails and website, and you'll have more information. And again, this will be uploaded onto the website if you'd care to watch this recording at a later date. So thank you all for coming, and enjoy the rest of your Saturday.